Romania now happens to be one of the fastest growing economies in Europe, FDI, foreign direct investment at a record high. And yet, I have to tell you, your country has notoriously underperformed since being part of the EU. What do you say to people who want you to reform faster and really get that economy on more of a solid footing?
First of all, hello, and thank you very much for inviting me. As you mentioned, yes, I'm here for the second time in 6 months at the London Stock Exchange just to celebrate the second successful IPO for a Romanian state-owned company in energy. And I would just say that the last figures, almost 4% economic growth, just 6.7 unemployment, that raise hopes that not only Romania, but almost all the new members of the European Union in the eastern part of Europe, we are much better prepared now for all the challenges, especially in the energy sector, that are coming from the bad relationship that European Union has now with Russia.
And we'll get to that topic in a minute, but what about reforms in Romania? You know, in your country, politics is a blood sport, and it really has affected the economy. We have battles between all the political parties, scandal involving the president. What is being done in your country right now to really live up to those expectations that so many in your country and in Europe want you to fulfill?
You're right, politics is it's a bloody sport in Romania, but not only in our country. What is important is in the last more than 2 years since I took office as Prime Minister, we have promoted the two keywords, stability and predictability for the business environment, and the answer has been better than we expected. That's why I mentioned not only the economic growth, which is now the fastest one in the European Union, but even more important are the structural reforms. And right now we have another challenge to implement a very professional corporate management for all the state-owned companies. And as it happened today in the IPO of Electrica, it seems that the private investors have trust in this stability and predictability of the country.
I'm going to assume, I'll ask you right now, you will run for president. You're going to announce that in the summer? You will be taking up that challenge?
Maybe yes, but what is important is that Romania will keep this positive path, because as you have mentioned before, the first years of our membership of the European Union had been very tough years, and right now, after many difficult years and many sacrifices, it seems that Romania is not anymore an issue or problem for European Union. It's rather a very reliable and fast developing country in the eastern border of the European Union.
Well, I mean, I take your point that the economy is growing, but certainly if you look at the income levels of your citizens, they expected more by this time, and so did the EU. And a lot of that has to do with really the murkiness of the politics, the corruption scandals still making headlines in Romania and elsewhere. If, let's deal in, theory for a minute. Let's assume that you're going to be running for president and that you're in that job. If you make a pitch to your citizens in Europe right now, what will you do to get those reforms back on track and to make sure corruption is no longer an issue?
I would just say that I had the chance to be the youngest prime minister in Europe. Maybe I will be the youngest president in Europe. What is important is to prove that a young democracy like Romania is successful in economy, but must be also successful in implementing the rule of law, the democratic institution, and I trust that my generation has learned that the pro-Western, pro-European democracy is the right model for all the countries in the region.
And I want to bring you back to another topic that you first mentioned. Ukraine has paid a high price for that kind of posture, that European-leaning posture. You're on the record as saying that a tougher line has to be taken with Russia. You call it a so-called red line that has to be established. You want the backing of NATO, of Europe, of the United States. But what good will it do? Sometimes those red lines can be very dangerous because they certainly set up barriers to a country that Romania should be trading with, that has historically been an economic ally.
You're right, it's always much easier to have political statements than concrete actions. But what we see now at the near border of Romania, because maybe Ukraine or Moldova or Georgia might seem very remote for UK or for France politics, but they are our neighbors. And we just want to show that Romania's example, Poland's example, has been a successful story of integration in NATO and the European Union. And if the people of Ukraine, Moldova and Georgia, if the political leadership has had the courage to say yes to West, yes to NATO, yes to European Union, we should not just applaud them, but we should help them in meaning investing in infrastructure, investing in developing the democratic and European institutions. So from political statements, we must go further and very, very fast to concrete actions and concrete strategy for all these three countries to make them closer to Europe.
And certainly all eyes on your country right now. You have more than 1,000 NATO troops in your country, the EU also fixating on your economic reforms. Mr. Prime Minister, we thank you for taking the time to discuss this with us this morning.
I thank you very much.